The evening had started like any other at the busy restaurant. The place was filled with the hum of chatter, clinking glasses, and the occasional laughter of guests enjoying their dinners. Waiters moved quickly between tables, balancing plates and pouring drinks, trying to keep everyone happy. Among them, one waitress stood out, not because of her confidence or charm, but because she carried a quiet determination that was easy to miss. She moved with careful precision, making sure every table was attended to, every glass was filled, and every guest felt noticed. She had worked here for years, and while most of the attention in the restaurant went to the wealthy patrons, she had learned to blend into the background, letting her work speak quietly. That night, the restaurant was hosting a special charity event, and the atmosphere was even more electric than usual. A millionaire had come in, known for his flashy lifestyle and love of attention. He moved through the room with a sense of entitlement, greeting people with a smile that was both charming and a little imposing. The guests noticed him immediately, some with admiration, others with a hint of caution. He had a presence that could not be ignored. The waitress watched him from across the room, setting down a plate for a couple at one of the corner tables. She noticed how he seemed to enjoy being the center of attention, how he could command a room without saying much. When he finally approached the piano at the far end of the restaurant, she felt a flicker of curiosity. He had done this before, she thought. He liked to make people do things, often just to amuse himself or to impress the crowd. And tonight, he had set his sights on her. As she walked past the piano to deliver another dish, he called out her name. She froze for a moment, unsure if he was speaking to her. When she looked up, he was smiling in that way that made it hard to refuse, a mix of charm and expectation. He asked her, almost as a joke, if she could play the piano. She hesitated, shaking her head slightly. She wasn't someone who performed in front of people. Her piano skills were a private part of her life, something she had never shared with anyone in public. The millionaire laughed softly, a sound that carried through the room. "Come on, don't be shy," he said. "Everyone would love to hear you play." His eyes swept across the tables, and she realized that everyone was watching. Some guests smiled politely, others looked curious, and a few seemed amused at the idea of a waitress playing in front of a crowd. Her heart began to race. She wasn't sure what to do. Part of her wanted to run back to the kitchen and hide, to escape the eyes that were now all on her. But another part of her, a part she rarely acknowledged, felt a flicker of excitement. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing piano as a child, the joy she felt when her fingers moved over the keys, the music flowing from her heart. That part of her had been dormant for years, buried under the routines of work and life. And now, unexpectedly, it was being called into the spotlight. The millionaire's gaze softened slightly, sensing her hesitation but not willing to let it show weakness. "Don't worry," he said with a grin. "Just show us what you can do. I promise you'll enjoy it." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made it hard to refuse. She felt a mix of fear and anticipation as she walked toward the piano. Each step seemed heavier than the last, but she kept moving, driven by a strange combination of curiosity and a desire to prove herself. As she reached the piano, she paused for a moment, looking down at the polished keys. The restaurant had gone quiet, the usual chatter replaced by an expectant hush. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, the weight of their curiosity pressing down. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure where to begin. She closed her eyes for a brief second, recalling the melodies she had loved playing in private, the music that had always been her escape. Finally, she pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost tentative, but it carried across the room. She hesitated again, then played another note, then another. Slowly, the music began to flow, a simple tune that grew in confidence with each passing moment. The crowd listened in silence, surprised at the skill that had been hidden behind her quiet demeanor. The notes were clear and precise, yet they carried a warmth that touched the hearts of everyone listening. The millionaire leaned back slightly, a look of genuine surprise on his face. He had expected something awkward, perhaps even comical, But what he heard was something completely different. The music was beautiful, filled with emotion and finesse, revealing a talent that no one had anticipated. The waitress's hands moved with grace, her nerves giving way to the rhythm and melody that she had carried with her for so long. Guests exchanged glances, some whispering to each other in amazement. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. What had begun as a casual request from a wealthy man had turned into a moment of magic, a rare instance where talent shone unexpectedly in a place where it was least expected. The waitress, focused entirely on the music, felt a strange mixture of relief and exhilaration. She was no longer just a server in a busy restaurant. She was a musician, commanding the attention of the room with the skill that had always been hers. As the final note lingered in the air, a soft silence followed. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the applause began, tentative at first, then growing louder and more enthusiastic. Guests clapped, some rose from their seats, and a few even cheered. The millionaire smiled, a hint of admiration in his expression. He had underestimated her, and now he could see the depth of her talent. The waitress stood up from the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. She had faced the fear, stepped into the spotlight, and emerged not just unscathed but celebrated. The crowd's reaction was overwhelming, but in the midst of the applause, she felt a quiet, personal triumph. She had reclaimed a part of herself that she had hidden away, and for the first time in a long while she felt truly seen. As she returned to her duties, the restaurant buzzed with conversation about the unexpected performance. Guests spoke of the talent they had just witnessed, some speculating about her background, others expressing surprise that someone so unassuming could possess such skill. The millionaire, still observing from his table, nodded appreciatively, acknowledging that the evening had taken an unexpected turn. The waitress moved through the restaurant with a newfound confidence, serving plates and pouring drinks, but now with the knowledge that she had something extraordinary within her. She realized that talent could not remain hidden forever, and sometimes it only took a small push or a daring challenge to reveal it to the world. That night, what began as a simple act of coercion from a wealthy man turned into a defining moment, one that would be remembered by everyone present and would forever change the way she saw herself. After that night, the restaurant seemed different to the waitress. Even though the daily routine remained the same with plates to serve and drinks to pour, something inside her had shifted. Every glance from guests, every polite word of appreciation, felt warmer. Some regulars who had always barely noticed her now seemed curious, asking about her piano skills and complimenting the music they had heard. She felt a mixture of surprise and pride, realizing that a part of her life she had kept private had suddenly become visible to everyone around her. The days that followed were filled with small changes. She noticed the way people looked at her when she walked past, the way her co-workers exchanged quiet smiles, as if acknowledging something special she had done. She kept playing at home, letting the melodies that had long stayed in her memory flow freely again. Each note reminded her of the joy she had felt while performing for the first time in front of that crowd. It was as if she had unlocked a part of herself that had been hidden for years, and the sound of the piano felt like a bridge to that long-lost confidence. The millionaire's presence lingered in her thoughts too. She remembered the surprise in his eyes, the rare moment when someone so self-assured had been genuinely impressed. It wasn't just his wealth or status that made the memory vivid, but the realization that sometimes people with power could see talent in ways that no one else did. She wondered if he would come back to the restaurant, or if he had simply enjoyed the moment and moved on. But in that brief encounter, he had unknowingly given her more than applause. He had given her the courage to see herself differently. One evening, the restaurant hosted another special event, and this time, she noticed a few familiar faces from the previous night in the crowd. The atmosphere was lively, with chatter and laughter filling the air. As she moved through the tables, delivering meals and drinks, she felt a steady confidence growing inside her. The memory of playing the piano for the crowd made her movements feel lighter, and her smile more genuine. Guests seemed to notice, and some complimented her, not just for her service, but for the way she carried herself with quiet assurance. During a brief lull, the pianist for the event had a moment of distraction, and someone jokingly suggested that the waitress could take over again. A few guests laughed, but some seemed genuinely curious. She felt her pulse quicken at the idea. The thought of performing again, even for a small crowd, brought back a thrill she hadn't experienced in years. But this time, there was no millionaire pressing her to act. The decision was entirely her own, and that choice made the excitement different, sweeter. She realized that talent was not something to hide out of fear. It was something to embrace when the moment felt right. She approached the piano once more, this time feeling the instrument under her fingers with familiarity instead of fear. The first note she played was tentative, but it quickly grew into a flowing melody, one that seemed to fill the room with warmth and emotion. Guests listened, some nodding along, others closing their eyes to immerse themselves in the music. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the joy of sharing something beautiful. Her fingers moved naturally over the keys, and with each note, she felt more connected to the audience and to herself. The music was different this time. It carried a personal story, a mix of her past struggles and her current triumphs. The guests sensed the authenticity in her performance, the way each note was infused with emotion rather than skill alone. It was not just a display of talent. It was a revelation of who she was, of the quiet strength that had carried her through years of unnoticed effort. The applause at the end was heartfelt and spontaneous, not driven by surprise, but by genuine admiration. She felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that her music had touched people in a meaningful way. Over the following weeks, small opportunities began to appear. Some guests asked if she played professionally, others inquired about lessons, and a few even suggested that she perform at local events. The idea was both thrilling and intimidating. She had always seen herself as a waitress first, and now she was being recognized as a musician. The duality was strange, but invigorating. It made her see that life could hold more than one identity, that she could be both hardworking and talented, practical and artistic. Her coworkers noticed the change too. Some were curious, others supportive, and a few seemed slightly envious of the attention she received. Yet, she remained grounded, understanding that her talent was not about comparison but about self-expression. She spent time practicing, exploring new pieces, and experimenting with melodies she had only dreamed of playing. Music became a companion again, a constant source of comfort and joy amid the demands of her daily work. The millionaire did return to the restaurant once or twice, and each time, he nodded in acknowledgement, a silent gesture of respect rather than expectation. He never pressured her again, and she appreciated that. The brief encounter had been enough to ignite a change, but the ongoing support she felt came from within and from the small community around her. She realized that recognition from strangers could be fleeting, but the confidence she had gained was lasting. It was a lesson she would carry with her, one that no applause or praise could fully measure. One rainy afternoon, she found herself alone in the restaurant after her shift, sitting at the piano with the soft patter of rain outside the window. She played slowly, letting her fingers explore melodies without concern for perfection. The sound filled the empty room, a private concert for herself. She thought about the night when she had first performed in front of the crowd, how fear had transformed into exhilaration, and how one moment could change the way someone saw themselves forever. In that quiet space, she realized that music was more than talent. It was freedom, a way to express what words could not. As the weeks turned into months, she began to find balance between her work and her music. She took small steps toward performing in other venues, sometimes for friends, sometimes for small gatherings. Each performance reinforced the understanding that her talent was a gift to be shared, not hidden. The attention she received was never overwhelming because she had learned to anchor it with humility and gratitude. She had discovered that the most powerful recognition came not from applause, but from the feeling of connecting with others through her music. Her life slowly started to expand beyond the restaurant. She made time to learn new pieces, to explore different styles, and even to compose her own music. The piano became a source of creativity, a way to navigate challenges, and a way to celebrate victories, both large and small. Each note reminded her that courage could lead to transformation, that a single moment of exposure could blossom into a lifetime of possibilities. She understood that while the millionaire had sparked the initial moment, it was her own willingness to embrace the challenge that had allowed her talent to flourish. Through it all, she remained grounded in her daily life, aware that not every day would bring recognition or applause. She served meals, helped guests, and maintained the rhythm of her routine, but now with an added layer of self-assurance. The music she carried was no longer hidden. It lived in her hands, in her mind, and in the hearts of those who listened. She had learned that true skill, when nurtured and shared, could create moments of magic in the most ordinary places, and that even a life built on simple tasks could hold extraordinary experiences. That realization became her compass, guiding her through challenges, opportunities, and unexpected moments that would shape the rest of her story. The following week, the restaurant held another grand event, this time for a local celebration, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Guests arrived dressed in their finest attire, chatting excitedly as the staff hustled to make everything perfect. The waitress moved through the room with her usual calm efficiency, but now each interaction carried a quiet confidence. She had learned to carry herself differently after the previous event, aware that she had a talent that could capture the attention of everyone present. Yet, she remained humble, focusing on her duties while allowing her newfound skill to grow quietly in the background. As she served drinks to a nearby table, a familiar face from the previous event caught her attention. The millionaire had returned, this time with a small group of friends. He waved at her, and she nodded politely, a small smile on her lips. She was not nervous this time. The fear that had gripped her before had faded, replaced by a sense of calm readiness. She knew that her talent was her own, not something to be showcased for approval, and that thought made a significant difference. The evening unfolded with laughter and music, and soon the regular pianist who had been hired for the event began to play. But midway through, a technical problem caused the music to falter. The guests murmured in surprise, and the pianist appeared flustered. The millionaire, ever the observer, looked toward the waitress, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. Without needing a word, she understood the unspoken question. She could feel her heart beat faster, a familiar excitement rising within her. She approached the piano, feeling the polished keys beneath her fingertips once more. This time, she was not being forced or pressured. This time, it was a choice, a voluntary step into the light. She began to play softly, her fingers gliding over the keys as if no time had passed. The first few notes were gentle, testing the waters, but soon the music gained strength and fluidity. The room fell silent once again, guests leaning forward in their chairs, captivated by the sound. It was not just technical skill that held them. It was the emotion she poured into every note, the story she told without words. The melody was both familiar and new, carrying a depth that surprised even her. She realized that her music had evolved since the first night. Each performance added layers, each note now more expressive, more connected to who she was. The millionaire's initial curiosity shifted into genuine astonishment. He had seen her play before, but this time the difference was clear. She was no longer nervous or hesitant. She was confident, embracing her own ability, and it showed. Her hands moved with grace and precision, yet the performance was infused with warmth, with the humanity that only came from passion. Guests exchanged glances, some whispering in admiration, others simply lost in the music. It was not a fleeting surprise. It was a commanding presence, one that drew everyone in and held them there. The music flowed effortlessly, and she found herself improvising, weaving in melodies that expressed her personal journey. The hours of practice, the quiet moments at home, the dreams she had tucked away, all of it found its voice in her performance. The crowd could feel it, even if they did not know the story behind each note. She was telling a story of resilience, of hidden strength, of a talent that had waited patiently for its moment. The applause that followed was thunderous, not just polite recognition, but a heartfelt response to the beauty she had shared. After the performance, guests approached her, eager to compliment and encourage. Some wanted to know where she had trained, others asked about future performances. For the first time, she felt seen not just as a waitress, but as a musician, as someone whose passion could touch the lives of others. The millionaire approached too, a genuine smile on his face. He complimented her with a warmth that was different from the previous night, a recognition of talent rather than an amused surprise. She felt a mix of gratitude and quiet pride, understanding that this acknowledgement was meaningful but not essential. The true satisfaction came from within. As the evening continued, she returned to her duties, but her presence now carried an aura of quiet command. Her co-workers noticed, some smiling with encouragement, others observing with subtle admiration. She moved through the restaurant with a balance of professionalism and personal pride, aware of the difference a single performance could make. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a conduit for her confidence, a tool for expressing herself in ways words could not. The following days brought more subtle changes. Some regular guests returned, asking about her piano playing, sharing how much they had enjoyed the performance. Others encouraged her to explore opportunities beyond the restaurant, suggesting local events or community gatherings where she could perform. The idea was tempting but also daunting. She had always been practical, used to the routines of work, and the thought of stepping further into the public brought a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Yet, she knew that her talent was a gift, one that could not remain hidden indefinitely. One afternoon, after her shift, she sat at the piano in an empty corner of the restaurant, letting her fingers dance over the keys. The sound was familiar, comforting, and invigorating all at once. She explored new melodies, experimented with rhythms, and allowed herself to play freely without concern for anyone watching. It was a private joy, a moment of personal triumph. As she played, she realized that each performance in front of others had strengthened her, built her confidence, and refined her skill. She was no longer the hesitant waitress of the first night. She was a musician in her own right, capable of expressing herself fully. Word of her performances began to spread beyond the restaurant. Some guests shared videos on social media, careful not to exploit her but to highlight her skill. People in the community began to recognize her, some attending the restaurant specifically to hear her play. Each interaction, each acknowledgement, reinforced her understanding that her music had value, that it could connect people and create meaningful moments. She felt a sense of responsibility, not to perform perfectly, but to remain authentic, to let her music carry the emotions she felt. The millionaire continued to visit occasionally, observing quietly from a distance, never imposing, but offering occasional words of encouragement. His presence reminded her of how far she had come, from being coerced into playing once, to now owning her performances fully. She no longer felt the pressure of expectation but the freedom of choice. Every time she sat at the piano, it was because she wanted to share her music, because it was a part of her identity that she could no longer ignore. Through these experiences, she also noticed subtle changes in herself. She walked with more confidence, spoke with greater assurance, and approached challenges with a calm determination. Her coworkers looked to her as an example of how dedication and hidden talent could emerge when given the chance. She had become a quiet inspiration, showing that courage and skill could intersect in ways that transformed not only her life but also those around her. The piano remained a central part of her life, both a private sanctuary and a means of connection with others. She began exploring more complex pieces, learning new styles, and even experimenting with composing her own music. Each note reflected her journey, from the nervous first performance to the confident musician she was becoming. The restaurant became not just a workplace, but a stage for growth, a space where her talent could flourish alongside her daily responsibilities. One evening, as she played alone after a busy day, she reflected on the events that had led her here. What had started as a forced moment by a wealthy man had turned into a catalyst for personal transformation. She understood now that fear and hesitation were often gateways to growth, and that hidden talents, when nurtured, could reveal themselves in moments of unexpected opportunity. Her music had become a bridge between her past and her future, a way to express feelings that had long remained unspoken. It was more than skill. It was an extension of herself, a testament to resilience, courage, and the beauty that can emerge from embracing one's gifts. The next few weeks brought more opportunities for the waitress to showcase her talent, though none came in the form of obligation. It seemed that word of her performance had traveled beyond the walls of the restaurant. Invitations for small gatherings, local events, and even private parties began arriving, though she remained careful, choosing only those that felt genuine and safe. She had learned that her music was powerful not because of pressure or attention, but because it was authentic and connected to her personal story. One evening, a local art gallery invited her to play at a charity exhibition. She hesitated initially, unsure if she was ready to perform for a completely new audience, but she felt a quiet pull toward the opportunity. It was another chance to test herself and share the music that had been tucked away for so long. When she arrived at the gallery, she found a space filled with paintings and sculptures, the air alive with quiet conversation and appreciation for creativity. She was no longer the shy waitress stepping nervously into the spotlight. She was a musician about to offer a piece of herself to others. She sat at the piano placed in the center of the gallery, the polished surface reflecting the lights and the faces of the audience. At first, the room seemed intimidating, filled with people whose eyes were curious but neutral. She took a deep breath and let her fingers find the keys, starting with a simple melody. As the notes filled the room, the atmosphere changed. Conversations paused, heads turned, and a hush fell over the crowd. Her music carried warmth and emotion, telling a story without words. It was a story of quiet resilience, of a talent that had waited patiently for recognition. Guests moved closer, some closing their eyes, others smiling in quiet appreciation. The music seemed to wrap around the room, weaving a connection between her and everyone present. Each note spoke of years of practice, of private moments spent at the piano, and of courage born from unexpected opportunity. She noticed the subtle reactions, the nods, the soft sighs of awe, and she felt a sense of fulfillment deeper than applause. This was different from the restaurant, where surprise had been part of the reaction. Here, her performance was fully embraced, appreciated for its beauty rather than its novelty. The millionaire attended as well, though he stayed at the back, quietly observing. He had come out of curiosity but found himself genuinely moved. The transformation he saw in her was remarkable. She was no longer hesitant or unsure. She was commanding the music with presence and feeling, and it was clear to everyone that she owned the moment. He nodded silently, a subtle acknowledgement that she had surpassed any expectation he could have held. His reaction was quiet but sincere, and it meant something to her, though not as much as the connection she felt with the audience through her music. After the performance, the gallery visitors approached her, offering compliments, praise, and encouragement. Some were local artists, others patrons who appreciated creative expression, and a few were simply moved by the authenticity of what they had experienced. A curator asked if she would consider performing at future exhibitions, and a local music teacher suggested collaboration on a small recital. Each offer was tempting, yet she approached them with thoughtfulness, recognizing that her growth needed to be steady and aligned with her comfort. Over the next few days, she reflected on the performance and its impact. She realized that her journey had shifted from moments of fear to experiences of choice and empowerment. The music was no longer a secret skill or a hidden talent. It was a living part of her identity. She found joy in practicing, exploring new pieces, and experimenting with compositions that expressed emotions she had long kept private. Her confidence had grown not only as a musician but as a person, and it radiated in her daily life, in interactions both professional and personal. In the restaurant, she noticed subtle changes as well. Guests often asked if she would play, remembering the performances they had witnessed or heard about. Her co-workers treated her with a mix of respect and admiration, no longer seeing her only as a server, but as someone who carried a remarkable skill. Even the regulars who had once overlooked her now sought her out for conversation, curious about her music and life beyond the restaurant. She carried herself with quiet pride, aware that recognition was rewarding, but not the main purpose of her efforts. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, she found herself alone at the piano, reflecting on the journey so far. She played slowly, each note resonating with the memories of the nights she had performed, the fear she had overcome, and the confidence she had cultivated. The piano keys were familiar, comforting, and yet always capable of producing new emotions and expressions. She realized that the moments that had once seemed daunting were now opportunities to explore creativity and connect with others in meaningful ways. Her interactions with the millionaire had shifted as well. He no longer expected her to perform, yet he occasionally visited and acknowledged her talent with subtle gestures or quiet words of appreciation. His presence had once represented pressure and uncertainty, but it now felt like a silent validation, a reminder of how far she had come. She understood that recognition from others, while gratifying, was secondary to the personal satisfaction she derived from expressing herself through music. During this period, she also started experimenting with original compositions. She would spend hours in her small apartment, letting melodies flow freely, sometimes inspired by daily experiences, other times by memories and emotions she had long tucked away. Writing her own music brought a new dimension to her talent, allowing her to create something uniquely hers. It was both exhilarating and humbling, a reminder that talent was not just about performance, but also about exploration, growth, and expression. The community around her began to take notice as well. Invitations to small events, local gatherings, and community performances increased. People who had witnessed her play before spoke highly of her skill, sharing stories with others and spreading the word. She was no longer simply a waitress with a hidden talent. She had become a known figure in her own right, someone whose music could evoke emotion, inspire others, and create memorable experiences. Each opportunity reinforced her understanding that courage and dedication could transform ordinary moments into life-changing ones. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to work at the restaurant, balancing her responsibilities with her music. The piano became both a sanctuary and a platform, a way to connect with her own emotions while sharing them with the world. She learned to navigate attention gracefully, choosing where and when to perform, always keeping authenticity at the heart of her decisions. The fear that had once held her back was replaced with a sense of empowerment, a knowledge that her talent was not just for others, but for herself as well. One quiet afternoon, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the nervous, hesitant waitress who had been pushed to play by a wealthy man, she had grown into someone who could step confidently into the spotlight on her own terms. Each performance had built her resilience, each note had strengthened her confidence, and each interaction had expanded her understanding of what it meant to embrace one's gifts. She realized that the true power of her talent lay not in recognition, applause, or opportunity alone, but in the ability to connect, express, and evolve. Through it all, she never forgot the lessons she had learned along the way. Fear could be transformed into courage, hesitation into expression, and hidden talent into an authentic, powerful force. She continued to play, to explore, and to share her music, knowing that each note was a testament to her journey, her growth, and the beauty of discovering one's own voice in a world that often overlooked quiet strength. Months had passed since that first night when she had been coaxed to play the piano in front of the crowd. The once timid waitress had grown into a confident musician, and her life had subtly shifted in ways she never expected. Each day she worked at the restaurant, she carried herself differently. She moved with purpose, smiled with genuine warmth, and even the most mundane tasks felt lighter now. The piano had become a companion, a tool for expression, and a bridge to experiences that had seemed impossible before. One afternoon, the restaurant hosted a special event for local community leaders. The room was full of energy, filled with people from various walks of life. She went about her duties, but there was a quiet anticipation in her chest. She had been asked to play again, this time not as a joke or challenge, but because the organizers genuinely wanted her music to set the tone for the evening. The request felt different. It was an acknowledgement of her skill, a sign that her talent was being recognized and appreciated on its own merit. As she approached the piano, she noticed the crowd's subtle shift. People leaned slightly forward, their attention turning toward her. There was no fear this time, only a steady calm. She settled at the keys and began to play, the first notes soft and inviting. The melody grew, filling the room with warmth, drawing people into the music. Guests listened intently, some closing their eyes, others simply absorbing the beauty of the moment. The notes were more than sound. They were an extension of her, a reflection of her journey, of the courage it had taken to share her hidden talent. The millionaire was present once again, seated near the back, watching quietly. There was no amusement in his expression this time, no hint of expectation. Instead, there was respect, a silent acknowledgement of her growth and talent. He had once played a part in pushing her into the spotlight, but now he witnessed her success as an independent artist, someone who had embraced her gift fully. His presence was a quiet reminder of how far she had come, from fear and hesitation to mastery and confidence. The audience reacted not with surprise but with genuine admiration. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. She played with intention, allowing herself to feel the music as it moved through her fingers. The room was transformed. Conversations ceased, and the only sound was the piano resonating with the depth of her talent. The applause that followed was heartfelt and enthusiastic, not just for the technical skill, but for the authenticity and emotion that radiated from her performance. After the event, she was approached by a local music coordinator who had heard of her performances through friends and social media. He suggested she consider performing at more formal events and even offered to help organize small concerts where she could showcase her music to larger audiences. The idea was thrilling and a little overwhelming, but she felt ready. She realized that her talent had been waiting for opportunities like this, and now she had the confidence to accept them on her own terms. Back at the restaurant, life continued, but the perception of her had shifted. Guests often asked if she would play, sometimes requesting specific melodies, and her co-workers treated her with newfound respect. The duality of her life, working as a waitress while also being a recognized musician, created a sense of balance and richness she had never experienced before. She managed the attention gracefully, understanding that while recognition was rewarding, it was the connection to her music and the joy it brought that truly mattered. She also began mentoring a few young, aspiring musicians from the community. Sharing her experiences and guiding them through challenges reminded her of her own journey and the courage it took to embrace her talent. It was a different kind of fulfillment, one that reinforced the value of perseverance and authenticity. Her story inspired others, not because of wealth or fame, but because of the human experience of discovering and nurturing hidden potential. One quiet evening, she sat at the piano after a long day, reflecting on the remarkable path she had traveled. The journey had begun with a single, uncomfortable moment when she was coerced to perform, but it had evolved into a series of choices that allowed her talent to flourish. She understood now that fear and pressure could catalyze change, but true growth came from embracing opportunities and trusting oneself. Each note she played reminded her of resilience, courage, and the unexpected ways life could present possibilities. The community continued to recognize her music, but more importantly, she had gained the confidence to pursue larger aspirations. She began composing her own pieces, experimenting with different styles and harmonies. The piano was no longer just a place for performance. It was a space for creativity, self-expression, and personal growth. Each composition reflected her experiences, her emotions, and the lessons she had learned along the way. The millionaire, though a part of her early story, remained a minor figure in the larger narrative of her life. His initial challenge had sparked the beginning, but it was her own determination, dedication, and passion that carried her forward. She realized that while external validation could open doors, the true power of talent was realized through self-belief and the willingness to act on one's gifts. As months turned into a year, her life transformed in ways both big and small. She performed at local venues, collaborated with other musicians, and began to cultivate a following who appreciated her music for its authenticity. She remained grounded, balancing her work at the restaurant with her growing musical endeavors. The piano had become a lifelong companion, a source of joy, and a testament to the possibilities that arise when hidden talents are nurtured. One afternoon, after a particularly moving performance at a community event, She stepped off the stage and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had traveled a long road from the anxious waitress who had hesitated at the piano to a confident musician whose art touched others. The applause and compliments were rewarding, but what mattered most was the realization that she had claimed her voice, embraced her gift, and transformed her life through courage and perseverance. She thought about the journey and smiled quietly. Every moment of fear, hesitation, and uncertainty had led her to this point. Each opportunity to perform had strengthened her. Each note played had built her confidence, and each interaction with the audience had reminded her of the connection between music and human emotion. She had learned that talent was not only about skill, but about authenticity, courage, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. In the quiet of the evening, she played one final piece, letting the music flow freely, unrestrained, a celebration of her journey. The notes resonated, carrying the story of growth, discovery, and triumph. And in that moment, she knew that her life had changed forever, not because of wealth, pressure, or expectation, but because she had dared to trust herself and allow her hidden talent to shine.